that's one of the biggest challenges that we have as an industry, the distillers, is we're allowed to sell outside here on location, but it's as if we are an SAQ store.
Okay.
So in theory, when we sell a bottle to someone here, is as if we buy it from the SAQ and sell it to them.
Okay.
So we owe money to the SAQ as if it was sold from any other SAQ store.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to All Beer Inside. Today we are in Granby, Quebec, which is part of the Eastern Townships, and joining me is Vincent of Distillerie La Chaufferie.
Exactly.
Thank you very much for inviting us out today to speak to you about your distillery.
Yes.
I'm way too used to saying brewery now. So your distillery, and well, you do have the bar program, which we'll speak about after too. So thank you very much for taking time out of your day to speak with us about La Chaufferie.
All right. Well, welcome to La Chaufferie.
So what's the story? What made you lead the creation of La Chaufferie?
Basically, La Chaufferie comes from a couple of different directions. So there's Brian Furlong, my main partner, who, hence the name of our first gin, which was the Furlong. He's a lawyer who has a law firm just on the other side of the street, and he really loved gin. He started making gin in his kitchen for fun, and he had a little dream of starting a little gin production in the barn in back of his house. And while his friends sat him down and said, well, that's an awful idea because people will be showing up at your house all the time. And he's already kind of a workaholic, so the idea of having all his free time, people showing up, buying bottles of gin, it would be a little hard on his marriage. And so he said, yeah, you guys are right. But he kept the dream alive. And on the other side, well, you have myself, Vincent. Basically, I studied in ecology. When I finished school, there was no real jobs that I wanted to do in ecology, and so I started drinking. And I fell in love with fermentation. So I started making cheese at home, making beer at home, playing around with different stuff. And I told myself, well, maybe I can make a living out of this. So I started working in different breweries. I started from the bottom, bottling lines. This was a little bit before the microbrewery explosion, so there wasn't as many opportunities as there is now. And so I climbed up, I became a brewer. I got to go brewing in Denmark, and then came back. I started working on different vineyards in the Eastern Townships, so in Dunham, Fredericksburg area. And from there I started distilling at home for fun, which it's been long enough now I can mention. It's totally illegal. But a lot of people start that way. So I started distilling. I had access to old wine, and I was making beer, so I started playing around with distilling different stuff. And I told myself, well, didn't seem to be any distilleries at that point. So I applied, and I got the opportunity to go to the Cayman Islands, and that's where I learned how to use the big stills. So I had a lot of fun making rum down there, but it wasn't home. So I came back, and I wanted to start something out here. And at that point, I didn't have a lot of money, so my plan was to put a still on a trailer and drive around to the different vineyards and rent out the equipment and my services, kind of like they do for bottling lines and they do for filters and all sorts of other equipment.
It's almost like a reverse contract brewing.
Yeah, exactly. So I show up because the vineyards just got the right to distill, but it seems kind of silly to me that everybody buys this small little still that they use a couple of weeks a year when you could just rent some time on the still. We show up at your place. But so I was doing my business plan when by luck of life I ran into one of Brian's good friends who was giving a presentation on financing, how to talk to banks, how to get financing. And so I talked to him after his presentation. He told me that he liked my enthusiasm, but thought my plan was completely illegal. The idea of having a still moving around without a fixed address, it's pretty easy to just park in back of a barn and start making moonshine, and it would be a lot more profitable than what we're doing now. But he told me that he knew a guy who wanted to start a distillery. So we met actually just on the other side of the parking lot here at Archibald, the restaurant. And after a couple of cocktails, we decided that we had the same vision of where we wanted to go. And we got to, at this point, the building that we're in now, the distillery was abandoned.
Okay.
So we got to borrow the keys. We came over, and as soon as we walked into the building, it was clear that we had to do it here. So we shook hands and we started the project. Took a while of convincing people to put in money and a lot of renovations, but we're pretty happy with what we got to do here.
I mean, it's very clear. You can tell this building's been here from what, the 1930s-ish?
Yeah,
So,
1915.
1915. So it's classic style. You know, it's
Old brick building.
old brick. It's all exposed. It feels like an old school kind of like pub.
Yeah.
That you show up, but with some more modern amenities. Clearly, you know, like a much better bathroom and not just a hole in the floor. So.
Yeah, you should have seen the place when we got here.
Yeah.
It was abandoned. They closed the factory down in the 60s.
Okay.
And they left the building basically abandoned up until when we arrived in 2018. So there was a lot of work, a lot of love to put into the place, but yeah, definitely. As soon as we walked in here, it was like, this is where we have to do it.
It's crazy, like through our adventures of just breweries, cideries, distilleries, beer stores, like what it used to be, and it just sat there unused, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's bringing happiness to the people, as I say, like happiness. You actually brought some stuff out for us to try. You want to try something here?
Yeah. So being a wine guy, I really love working with fruit whenever I can. Want to or not, it's always a little bit more expensive to work with, but it's a fun pleasure of life.
Okay.
So we have a farm not so far away from here that has a lot of prunes. And so we decided, one year he called us up. Well, it was around COVID. There was no alcohol anywhere. He needed alcohol to disinfect his tools. And so we gave him some alcohol. And at the end of the year, he called us up and said, hey, I've got a lot of prunes that are going to be dequalified because they're overripe and I can't bring them to market. Can you do something with this? And I was like, hell yeah. So we picked up all the prunes and we made an eau de vie de prune, a prune spirit.
Okay.
Some people will call it slivovich. There's a whole bunch of names all throughout Eastern Europe for an eau de vie de prune.
Yeah.
Basically, we crush up the prunes and we ferment it. We ferment it with the pits, and then we'll try to distill everything together. So you have really that nice, like, cheers.
Toast.
So you have that really, like, nice prune kind of like cooked prune smell to it. And then a little bit of the almond in the background. Yeah.
Oh, that's smooth.
Yeah. So for 40% alcohol, it really just slides right down there.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, there's been a lot of really bad eau de vies out there. So a lot of people think eau de vies are kind of like harsh and they burn but a well-made one, it's some of the nicest
I'm
alcohol.
getting, like, just right back here, I'm getting the almond.
Yeah.
Wow.
And like 3 seconds, 10 seconds later, you still taste the prune coming out. And
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's what's great, because even if we weren't doing the show, I'd be trying to discover guys like yourselves just coming out and trying new products, because we're all about supporting local businesses, whether it be, here in Quebec or Ontario or Vermont, New York, whatever other state. We're still, the way I see it is, if I'm going to a brewery and buying a guy's beer directly, I'm supporting local.
Yeah.
I'm supporting that town, I'm supporting the city, I'm supporting the state or the province. It's
everything.
That's so
small cycles.
Eventually, I'm sure I would have made my way out here for something else. I mean, there's a couple of breweries in the entire Eastern Townships.
Yeah.
You guys are pretty much on the way back to Montreal, so.
Yeah, we're 2 feet away. Anybody going out to the Dunham area, they pass through here. In the fall with the leaves changing, everybody loves coming down here. It's,
Yeah, we go on our drive up. It's like, oh yeah, fall's definitely happening.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, it's definitely happening right now.
Amazing. La Chaufferie is a pretty unique name. Where does that come from?
So basically, the building we're in now used to be the boiler house.
Okay.
So all the brick buildings you see around us, it used to be one big factory that was Imperial Tobacco. So they used to do chewing tobacco and pipe tobacco.
Okay.
So maybe that's why they closed in the 60s. Not many people are chewing tobacco anymore, or pipe tobacco, really. And also, the whole Quebec tobacco industry kind of crumbled. I guess we weren't very competitive and didn't make the best quality tobacco. But so this building was the boiler house.
Okay.
Hence, in French, you call it a chaufferie.
Okay.
A couple of details about the place, like we have really big windows. If you look around, that's because it just got really crazy hot in here. And the big parking lot in front of us was actually where they kept the mountains of coal.
Okay.
So
cool.
when they started out, it was all coal fed. So they had literally mountains of coal outside. They'd bring it inside here, feed the boilers, and they'd send steam to the other buildings around.
Yeah.
So there used to be like overpassages.
Yeah.
And there's still a tunnel under the street. Yeah. So. Yeah.
So if Prohibition comes back, you just sneak it out that way.
Exactly.
Which I can never actually see happening ever again.
Hopefully.
It failed back then. It would never succeed anymore. Alcohol is more or less pandemic proof when you think about it. Like people are like, oh, I'm stuck at home. I'm gonna need a drink. So. And then thankfully, the SAQs and such, I'm sure you guys were allowed to sell out of your door as well during the pandemic. So
I mean, that's one of the biggest challenges that we have as an industry, the distillers, is we're allowed to sell outside here on location, but it's as if we are an SAQ store.
Okay.
So when we sell a bottle to someone here is as if we buy it from the SAQ and sell it to them.
Okay.
So we owe money to the SAQ as if it was sold from any other SAQ store. So that really makes it hard for anybody who doesn't know. Like a bottle of gin that we sell for $48, out of that we get 13.
Oh.
And so when we sell it on site here, we get about 16.
Yeah.
And so that makes it pretty hard for any kind of like tourism business around that. So because if you really do the math, and I try not to anymore, we lose money selling bottles on site now.
That's really important. I'm a big proponent because we just celebrated, or not, a month ago from the recording, it's National Canada Beer Day, and one of their things is like we got to drop the borders for beer. I know alcohol you could sell across Canada, which is at least one thing.
Yeah, but it's every province is different, and so you
yeah.
have to find a distributor over there. So in theory, you can do it. In practice, it's still not that easy. But
It feels like sometimes just whatever government's in charge just doesn't want local businesses to succeed. Sometimes it's so weird.
Alcohol. Spirits are still somewhat considered like the devil. We're dealing a lot with that. And I understand it's very highly taxed, and I understand it is a luxury, and I do enjoy having nice roads and hospitals and whatnot.
Yeah.
But it is very hard for a small distillery to get installed, and especially anybody who's doing grain to glass like we are, where it costs a lot more money to make our alcohol. It costs us more money. But everything that we spend to produce our alcohol goes to the local farmer that we're buying our grain from, goes to the local company that's making stickers, and whoever we're buying our fruit from. So we do a lot of liqueurs with different fruits. And so whatever money that we get to keep, really, we're going to send right back into our local community. So it's a different kind of taxation, I guess.
Yeah. I'm sure your spent grain goes to the farm animals eat it, and so that goes to a local butcher, and it's like a great kind of, people are always like recycle, reuse, reuse.
It's a very small nutrient cycle, right?
So, and that's what I love, again, is like, you said you're supporting the local farmer, but the local farmer is also supporting the Granby area.
Yeah.
So you got to keep it, and to me, just pony up a little more money and buy more premium local products.
Yeah. And like often people will ask us, well, now there's more and more of you. Is there like this kind of feeling of competition? But honestly, if we get 20% of just the Quebec market, we're all pretty happy. Like we can all survive together. But there's a little bit of a challenge ahead of us.
Yeah, the friendly competition is a good thing, I find, especially because, I mentioned beforehand that there's an absinthe place I want to try around here, because you guys don't do absinthe. I mean, absinthe is so rare to be made, so that's like definitely, and that's, a French product to begin with. So
it's very much,
Quebec,
he's specialized very much in that.
So, but I look forward to trying a few more things here. So what's the next thing we'd be trying?
Cool. So after that, we can go... Lots of options. So next one on the list is our newest gin. So basically, it's called the Foreman. So our concept with this gin is that we're actually trying to make a gin that's more accessible to people. So a lower priced gin, we're at $32 a bottle, which is quite competitive.
Yeah.
And we're going back to the roots of gin. So I find often now, it's a lot of fun, but a lot of gins now, you barely taste the juniper. You're really out there, really funky, which is fun. But our goal here was to bring it right back to its roots, kind of back to a Genever. So we, being grain to bottle, we make all our alcohol here. And so here we're using very much like a whiskey base. So we're not distilling it neutral at all. And then from there, we'll redistill it with our juniper, coriander, and angelica root. So the three basic components to a gin.
Okay.
And then, so you'll have a lot of the grain notes that still come through, but also all the classic juniper flavors.
Amazing. Yeah, Quebec is, like I say, we're lousy with juniper. There's just so much of it that it's surprising not to hear when a distillery has a gin in Quebec because there's so much of it.
Well, a lot of it is basically the spirit industry in Quebec for now really depends on bought alcohol, neutral grain spirits that people are buying and reworking. And so with a lot of distilleries aren't set up to actually make their spirit. And so when you aren't making your spirit, there's only a limited amount of stuff that you can do.
Okay.
You can make absinthe, you can make gin, you can make anything that's like herbs that you redistill.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of smaller distilleries that don't have fermenters and don't have the that sort of equipment. Well, they'll just bring out 4 or 5 different kinds of gin, and so to my opinion is that it's getting a little saturated, but it's still fun. There's a new gin every month. And
it's always, especially if you're willing to experiment, just do this bottle this month and then buy another bottle and then and just keep trying different ones or get together as a group and do a tasting. It's all right.
Cheers.
Toast. Oh, so smooth.
Yeah.
What's the alcohol on this?
So 40%.
40%, yeah. See, that's why I really enjoy local products, is I don't get like that extra burn I do from the big boys.
Yeah.
And that's why it's like, I could drink this straight, where if I'm having a local big, not a local, but a big vodka, I'm like, okay, I'm throwing in orange juice and other stuff.
I need to drown it out.
Yeah.
It's
and that's, a lot of people don't understand because their immediate mindset is, oh, this is going to burn going down. And it's like, no.
It doesn't have to.
It doesn't have to do that. Kind of that's a question I always like to ask too, is you have somebody who only drinks the mass stuff and they come in, and you do have a full bar program as well, but what's the gateway spirit in a sense that you're like, here, try this to change that mindset?
It really depends on like what kind of drink you are. So anybody who likes things a little bit sweeter and maybe like 40%, I'm used to it now, but some people still find it a little hard. Liqueurs are a lot of fun. So here we we have a local cherry liqueur, so made with sour cherries, and we have a black walnut liqueur, so that's made with local black walnuts. So not many people know, but we can grow nuts here in Quebec. And so that's a little bit, we're going to be around 24% alcohol and a little bit more sugar, so that makes it kind of easier to approach. Our sugar shack here is, I like to call a whiskey for beginners. So it's made in the same style as a whiskey, but while we're diluting it, we'll add in a little bit of maple syrup. So it's still at 40% alcohol, which is different than a lot of the maple whiskeys out there, but having that little bit of maple syrup really softens up the alcohol and makes it more accessible.
And for those who don't know, the Eastern Townships is Sugar Shack Central.
Yes, yeah,
so.
Everybody, we call it Sugar Shack because everybody's got a Sugar Shack in back their house.
Yeah.
There's, you walk around the woods here and you'll find abandoned Sugar Shacks all over the place.
It's nice that kind of things are reopening. Hopefully it stays this way with the way things are going with, unfortunately, the pandemic that's happened the last 2 years. But I got to get back to a Sugar Shack this fall. Spring, there's no question about it. So, and I mean, I think we saw 4 or 5 on the way up from Montreal at least. There's no question, like anybody, like you said, people are driving out here to check out the leaves change color. Come here, have a drink, keep your designated driver clearly, but whoever's not driving in the group, grab a drink, grab a beer, and buy a bottle on your way out. There's no question about it. So. When La Chaufferie was being created, any kind of like major roadblocks? Was the town of Granby like, we don't know about that? And...
Well, I mean, we had a lot of challenges during the construction, want to or not. Like, we were still amongst the first distilleries, and so not a lot of people knew what a distillery was. And so, like, asking plumbers and asking electricians, like, so basically, the floor downstairs started out as a drawing on a piece of loose leaf. That I calculated how much water we needed per machine, and then I showed that to the plumbers. They gave us a quote on how much they thought it was going to cost, and then they ended up tripling it.
Oh.
And, so those are the kind of surprises that really like rock the boat a little bit.
Yeah.
Want to or not, like the equipment was expensive, but installation was more expensive than the equipment. So, and there was a lot of little challenges, and then learning how to deal with the SAQ and all that really big learning curve.
Did you find the town was very welcoming when you guys started up? It's like, yes, another location to try.
Yeah, well, we were really lucky in that distilleries usually have to be in industrial part of town, and so the building here, being the history that it had, they never really changed the zoning. So we're like basically downtown Granby, in the old industrial part, and so that was really lucky for us that we got such a great location when we started out.
Because usually places like this are all condos now.
Yeah.
So the fact that you guys are kind of, you had a cheat code when you think about it to come in here, and we're technically industrial, so you can't really.
Because they just never changed it. It was a building they kind of forgot about. No one did the paperwork, and
a building from the early 1900s. Was there a lot of like? There's only certain things you could do because it's considered historical, or
so there's a lot of challenges in like our windows. The first couple of months was myself and a local woodworker making all the windows by hand. I'm not a woodworker, but I learned how to sand. So they're all it was all made out of mahogany, all made here on site. Our bar here was a wood shop for like 6 months. And same thing with the libraries. We made them all on site here. And so lots of little adventures of dealing with pouring the cement to sandblasting all the walls to bring the brick back. And and
then who does, like, you have quite the unique concept. There's a nice art piece here. Who did that?
Oh, well, that's an original. It's a classic. It's Gin Alley.
Okay.
So it used to be an old publicity against gin. So because there was Beer Lane and Gin Alley. So Beer Lane, everybody's happy and skipping, and then Gin Alley, you see like people are getting buried. There's a baby falling. It was this big publicity.
There's a cannibal in the corner.
Yeah. So blind kid. Big publicity against gin back in the day, and like many smear campaigns, the people who really love gin kind of just grabbed it and turned it around.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Love that. And when it comes to your labeling and your designs and your naming, you're working with local people for that stuff?
Yeah. So all sorts of little stories behind our names, and then we have a local graphic designer that does them. And
yeah, because you mentioned Furlong is one of the original owners.
Yeah.
And then you got Foreman. Sugar Shack's very clear what it is.
Yeah.
So that's kind of just, okay, we kind of naming the history of this building and what we're doing.
Exactly.
Okay.
So our big, having a building with so much soul, our big goal was to kind of like make that shine through our product and shine through our brand. Yeah. So really, and we do make very classic products. So we're kind of out there a little funky in that we're still staying rooted in classic. So we like to say that we're inspired by tradition, but reinventing it nonetheless.
Yeah.
So.
Because even your furniture, like it's a lot of old school. I mean, the tables that go up.
Yeah, the old cranks and the old industrial.
Is this all poured concrete, the bar? Okay.
So
Because it
was,
looks like an original slab that was just kind of cut out and sent to you from a quarry or something. So
yeah, so that was another great adventure, pouring that slab on site. And there's a guy basically polishing the rocks for like 3 days. Poor guy.
Yeah. The mustachio gentleman on your eau de vie, where is he?
Yes.
Who's he?
So the eau de vie is called Maître Pierre.
Okay.
And so that's actually named after the guy who owns the orchard. So he is a retired lawyer who used to work in agricultural law, and fittingly enough, in retirement, has started up an orchard where he specializes in prunes and pears. And so I don't have a bottle here, but we also, on site there, we do a Paul Williams. So we grow a pear inside a bottle and then make a pear eau de vie that we pour on top.
Cool.
So every year we have 50 or so bottles of that. They go fast, but it's a lot of fun to do.
I see on tap you have Trou du Diable as well in cans.
Yeah.
And
So-
then, a couple of Molson, the big boys, as they call them, Molson and stuff. What made you go with them and not try and go with, like, let's say, unfortunately, Vroden's changing, but let's say Vroden down the street, like.
Well, basically our goal here was to do cocktails, right?
Okay.
So like our goal is to promote our own products, and but mind you, when there's a band and when there's a bunch of people, often you have 1 or 2 people in the group that like, well, I just really want a beer.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay. And so, but we didn't really have that in our budget, and our goal, usually if somebody wasn't willing to try the cocktails, well, they didn't really want a super funky beer.
Yeah.
So it was kind of just to have an alternative for that 1 or 2 people in the gang that just want their traditional.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know when it comes to collabs, you clearly work with a lot of farms and orchards and things like that, but what are some other collabs that you've done when it comes to, you said you kind of do a local charcuterie type thing? Or?
Yeah, so we've done a collab with Les Quatre Saisons, so they made a dried sausage with our Sugar Shack, and then we've done also with Dunham Brewery. We've swapped barrels a couple of times, so they'll take some of our old barrels, and they sent us some of their old beer barrels, so we kind of swapped around with that a few times. I work with a couple of local vineyards and orchards that will. We do a herbal liqueur that isn't here, but that's made with entirely recuperated alcohol.
Okay,
so we'll
cool.
go. I drive around because I obviously have too much free time. I drive around between different vineyards and pick up the bulb. It's like when you're making wine, it's the stuff that falls to the bottom of the tank. It looks kind of like muddy and disgusting, but it still has a lot of great aromas and great alcohol present. So we'll go recuperate that. I've worked with a couple of cider houses where we'll recuperate some of their ciders that they're less happy with. And then that alcohol is still really good alcohol, and we'll use that as a base for our liqueurs, which is our herbal liqueur.
Yeah, it's so cool that you could kind of recoup like what would have been a lost product for them. You're like, no, we'll take that. So.
And we can give it a plus value, an added bonus, because like often it's because it's kind of muddy. It doesn't really look very nice. It wouldn't make a very pretty wine, but the wine aromas are still present. Grape skins, you can make grappa, and it's great. Yeah. And so.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had a good grappa. I just have like the mass-produced stuff that is sold to SAQ, and you're at an Italian wedding, and you're like, well, I have to drink a grappa. I wonder what like a local good. I'm hoping good grappa would taste like.
Yeah, well, it has a really nice texture. It doesn't have to burn.
The ones I drink all burn. It's not fun.
I had a spirit teacher once tell me, you can tell a good grappa producer not when you arrive on site, not because of your nose or your eyes, but because of your ears, because you can hear the flies at the bad places, because they've got mountains of grape skins lying outside, and you can just hear the swarms of flies going. So, it's a smaller scale. You can definitely have more control over that. Make a better quality alcohol, and
You mentioned the Sugar Shack.
Yes.
Shall we try that?
Yeah, of course. So, this is our maple rye.
Okay.
So basically, it's a young whiskey, so it's not quite old enough for the whiskey name, but it's made in the same style. And then we'll come and soften it up with a little bit of maple syrup. But our goal here was really not to be super sweet either.
Yeah.
So like Coureur des Bois or Sortilège will have like 4 times more sugar.
Mm-hmm.
But here is just really so the balance out the maple and the spiciness from the rye.
Fantastic.
Cheers.
Prost. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to go to Sugar Shack now. Wow.
Yeah, so it's a lot of fun where like the maple syrup isn't too heavy. It's present, but it kind of like comes in waves.
Yeah, it just coats my tongue, coats my palate. So yeah, you know, as a Quebecer or anybody who kind of lives in the northeast part of Canada and the U.S., like Sugar Shacks everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, take advantage of that.
Yeah, such
People
a part
don't
of our
understand, you know.
culture and our heritage.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
yeah, you have to.
something should always have a Sugar Shack. If you could collab with anybody, because I don't know how a distilling collab would work, where you would work with another, like let's say gin place or whatever. But if you could work with anybody in kind of the alcohol, craft alcohol industry, who would that be with?
Well, we're kind of like throwing sticks out there to see. We've done some apple brandy with Distillerie Milton, just in Milton. We've done so open to working with anybody. It's always a lot of fun to have that exchange or just hang out and talk. How do you work? How I work, and try to figure out a way. Eventually, there's a lot of Quebec distilleries now that are slowly working on whiskeys. So it might be fun to do like a multi-distillery blend, because I'm sure we all have very different profiles on our whiskey, so it might be fun to play around with that. But we still have a couple of years before everybody will be ready for that.
Yeah.
So like as you were saying, there's a lot of Quebec gins now, but fairly soon, there's going to be a bunch more whiskeys on the market. It's starting now, but there will be more of us. And so that will be a lot of fun to watch.
Looking forward to La Cuvée that year in Montreal, where it's Quebec whiskeys instead of just Quebec gins or Quebec this. It's Quebec whiskeys for the first time in probably ever at La Cuvée. I'm looking forward to that day.
Yeah.
And definitely, thankfully, that's kind of almost downtown Montreal, so I can, you know, I always say never drink and drive. Always enjoy responsibly. Just take the metro. or if, you know, if you're coming in from out of town, there's lots of hotels and Airbnbs in downtown Montreal. So
definitely.
Amazing. Clearly, you're very busy, but let's say 2 weeks opens up at some point, and you could take a kind of a distillery-based vacation.
Yeah.
Where would you go?
Ooh, at this point, I've already gone down to Tennessee, so that was like Mecca.
Yeah.
It was really awesome to see, like, Tennessee and.
Because there's a whiskey trail through there, right? Yeah.
And so the Bourbon Trail as well. I did a whole bunch of that, and that was a lot of fun. It's a whole other world, right? They're so massive. You just see these fields with different rack houses lined up, and they're spaced out because in case one falls, they don't want all of them to burn.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of fun. I'd like to, obviously, one day go to Scotland and Ireland. I also like to make my way down to Cognac. It would be awesome to see the old Cognac distilleries and the Calvados region. There's no lack of great places to visit.
Yeah, that's kind of the problem. You know, I'm like, oh yeah, no, I want to go to Maine for beer, and somebody's like, well, but you have New Hampshire there. I'm like, oh yeah, and oh my God, there's like 300 breweries in New Hampshire, and even Vermont, there's 80 breweries for a state of 600,000 people, and oh, go to the East Coast, West Coast. I'm like, but where? They're like, no, the entire West Coast.
Yeah,
just go to Vancouver and work your way down.
And you'll never make it through.
Yeah. For myself, I'm out of town, clearly, but I come here, try some of your great alcohol, buy a bottle or two, friends in the area to try, even if it's not just for booze, but it's for food as well. Like, any local restaurants have you guys? Any breweries that you suggest in the area, or cideries? Like, who would you throw out there?
We're really well surrounded here, in that like anybody who's into wine this time of year is great. We're right close by to wine capital of Quebec, like all of Dunham and Dunham area. I think you have 15 vineyards in that same like 2-town radius. And from there, like close by, plus you have the Dunham Brewery, which has become quite famous. And so you have, close by here, you've got the Milton Cidery, which is a really awesome cidery and very awesome people. Like, you can walk around the apple trees. In the winter, you can go cross-country skiing through their orchard.
That's cool.
Here, Granby has a lot of really good restaurants. So that's a lot of fun. Like, and everything's pretty close by, so you can basically park here or walk down Main Street, and there's 5 or 6 really amazing restaurants. And well, if you're into spirits, there's l'Absintherie des Cantons that's in the same town, so just down the road, really. And then there's the Shefford Distillery in Shefford, and so there's a whole bunch of for anybody who's into craft spirits and craft alcohol. Period. There's a whole bunch of really good people not far away. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. That's I'm pretty naive. Like, outside of most Montrealers just know that Granby Zoo. It's like, no. There's more than that.
Yeah.
So.
And I mean, you can go to the zoo too.
Yeah. For anybody who's, I think they're called zoophiles, people who will visit a zoo in every single city that they're in.
Yeah.
Like, no matter what city they're in, they have to visit the zoo. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure that's quite an experience. Mine is just going to local craft spirit makers or beer makers or cider makers and enjoying the products.
Yeah.
Wine eventually too. We're called All Beer Inside, but realistically, we interviewed distilleries, we've interviewed a cidery, we've interviewed stores. It's like, okay, we have to do a vineyard at some point too.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really amazing ones, and this time of year is a lot of fun. There's usually a lot of activities around. They're in their harvest right now, so some places you can pick the grapes, other places you can squish them with your feet. There's all sorts of...
I always just think of that old YouTube video of the woman who was stomping the grapes and then fell, and it's like became one of the first, I think, viral videos where she fell, and people are like, "Ooh, I hope she's okay." So, yeah, I would try it, but knowing my luck, I would roll my ankle and I would probably fall out. So, you got one more for us to try.
Yes.
Here.
So this is now we're going towards our liqueurs, but even our liqueurs aren't that sweet. So a liqueur can typically be around 300 grams of sugar, 250 to 300 grams. Ours is around 150. So it's sweet, but it's still a lot less sweet than typical liqueurs. And so this is the Henri G. Henri G. So it's our black walnut liqueur. So to my knowledge, we're the only people in the world making a black walnut liqueur. Basically, that started out in that I have a couple of friends that had some black walnuts behind their house, and they're like, man, it would be really cool to do this. I tried to do it, and it's actually really hard to open up black walnuts. Anybody who has them around them, it's actually quite a lot of work. And I found this producer just north of Montreal, Jardin Viennois, and they planted a forest about 15 years ago, and now they're getting their first real harvest. And so I love them. They're kind of crazy. Basically, when he opens up, when he does his harvest, he'll take his walnuts, he'll dry them for 6 months, and then he'll start opening them. And when he opens them, he has a machine that opens them. And when he does that, it makes kind of like a flour that's a mix of nut and husk.
Okay.
And so you can't really eat it because it would destroy your teeth. But it has all the flavors still there. So we'll take that, and then we'll macerate it in our spirit that we make here on site.
Amazing.
And then work it out and sweeten it up, and it gives us this beautiful liqueur. So it kind of our way of replacing Frangelico or Amaretto.
Okay.
And so it makes really nice sours if you want, or one of my favorite is you mix that in with the Sugar Shack and you have a Godfather. No. So 1.5 ounces of Sugar Shack and maybe 1/2 ounce of Henri G, and you have this really beautiful drink on ice.
Amazing.
Yeah, cheers.
Toast. Oh, so clean.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all walnutty. Wow.
Yeah, it really plays around in there. So it has a sweet side, but it still has that kind of like bitterness to it. And
wow. And that's like 28-ish%, I guess?
24.
24, okay, yeah. Yeah, I could see these two working really well, like you said, on some ice. So, not too much ice because you don't want to really kill your palate.
Yeah,
but,
you don't want to freeze it out. But
so now that more or less things are reopened, are you guys hosting events here at all?
Yeah. So basically, pretty much every week we have bands that come and play here. So just on the stage in the corner there, and every Sunday we have improv night. So we have a league of improv people that come in. Wednesdays we have board game night,
Okay.
and so we're doing more and more events. Try to really give life to the space here, and so we have a little bit of food, but we're mostly a cocktail bar. So people come in for the 5 à 7 or after their dinner.
What's next for La Chaufferie as a brand?
Well, as a brand, we've been working on our whiskeys for a couple of years now, so we're about midway through aging out our whiskeys. So that's gonna come in the next while. We do a beet rum, so that's because having learned in the rum world, everybody was always asking me if I was gonna make rum one day. I always said no because it doesn't grow here. And but during the pandemic, we were making a lot of disinfectant, and we happened to come across these guys that were making beet molasses, so from local sugar beets. And we started making disinfectant with it. After a little while, figured it tasted way too good to make disinfectant with, and so we did a white rum, and it did okay. The people who love it really love it, but a lot of people who like white rum are really into making cocktails with Captain Morgan's, it's a tough market. But from there, we've been aging it. We released part of it as white rum, and we've been aging out the rest. And so this Christmas, we'll have a spiced rum, brum. So made with local sugar beets, and all Quebec spices. And so that's going to be a fun thing to come out this Christmas. And from there, we're always working on different little projects. So our goal here is really we make all our spirits from A to Z on site, and we use all local ingredients. So from there, we're always kind of playing around. I'd like to make more eau de vie like Maître Pierre, but want to or not, that's not where we make most of our money because people don't really know what they are yet.
I'm guessing these two are your big ones.
Yeah, so. Those two, and the Valentine, our cherry liqueur, did really well this summer. So depending on the season, and if ever you're around near the end of October, I know this video is going to come out after that.
Pretty much.
We do a really big festival in the parking lot where we burn pumpkins.
Okay.
So we have a really big fire, and then we throw pumpkins on the ambers, and so it burns the outside of the pumpkin but cooks the inside, and then we make a massive pumpkin soup, and we ferment it and distill it and make a pumpkin eau de vie.
Oh, cool.
And it really keeps the smoky side to it, so that's a lot of fun. If ever we do it every year, so at the end of October.
That's amazing. So, Vincent, thank you very, very much for taking time out of your schedule to speak with us about La Chaufferie today. Really appreciate you hosting us once again. For those who are looking for La Chaufferie, where can people find you?
All right, so we're at 145 Cowie here in Granby. So if you look up Distillerie de la Chaufferie, you'll find us. And so Granby, Eastern Townships, just an hour south of Montreal. So, and it's a pretty easy drive.
And on social media?
Facebook, La Chaufferie. We're also on Instagram.
Yeah.
And if ever you want to send us an email, info@lachaufferie.ca. So if you follow us on Facebook, you'll see often we have small batches. So like our pear La Paul Williams, the pears in the bottles, that when they're finally ready and labeled, we'll announce it, and people can reserve online to get their bottles.
Well, we have a friend who's really into rum, so we're probably gonna have to make our way out here and grab your beet rum for him. So.
Perfect.
And then if I can't find it here, you're available in local SAQs and such.
So and if they don't have it in your SAQ, ask for it. They should be able to bring it.
Perfect.
And you can always do the SAQ.com thing, so they'll ship you a bottle.
Yeah. So, I mean, personally, I'd rather buy here, but your hours are a little different than theirs, and
exactly. So we're open every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and now Sunday. From 4 till 10.
Perfect.
So Sunday we open a little bit later because it's the improv, but And every Saturday, if anybody's interested, we do guided tours of the distillery, so you can see from A to Z how we do all our spirits here, and we give tastings and the whole shebang.
Awesome. So all that's going to be in the show notes. As for us, allbeerinside.com is the website, at allbeerinside on all social media. And as I say at the end of all episodes, drink craft, not crap.
All right.